Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the New Beyond. I'm your host, Judith Rich, and my guest this week, whom I just cannot wait to dive into this conversation with my friend and colleague, Eric Antonette. Eric is a certified anger management specialist, a relationship and leadership coach, yoga teacher, Reiki master, and a regression therapist. Whew, boy, that's really substantial. He is trained specifically to deal with court-mandated anger management cases. Eric is passionate about helping couples release old negative patterns of behavior that keep them stuck in the past and teach them to build new relationships based on love, respect, trust, and connection. And today, Eric and I are going to explore the landscape of mastering emotions in relationships. So before we go there, first of all, welcome, Eric.
Thank you so much, Judith. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
And I'm sure our listeners are curious, as am I, about what led you to do this kind of work. Like, what has a person become an anger management regression specialist, regression therapist? What's that story about for you, Eric?
I would say, Judith, that goes back to my childhood and experiencing a relationship with my parents that was quite rocky. And there was a lot of anger, tension, triggers with my parents. And as a child who kind of was put in the middle of that, and was sort of a go-between between my parents to try to get them to get along. Yes.
Boy,
What was born this kind of savior fixer complex in me, that wanted to help them um, get along better. And obviously, that's a recipe for disaster.
goodness. And not to mention an incredibly heavy burden for a young child to carry.
Yeah, I don't think I recognized the depth of the burden when I was younger, but it's certainly I certainly became more and more aware of it as I got into unhealthy relationships where I felt like that was my role. And it's only since I started to do the deep work to realize that, well, I realized it wasn't working, first of all. And then once I realized it wasn't working, I realized there was work I needed to do on myself, to not be that anymore, to be okay with tension in a relationship, to be okay with conflicts, to be okay with arguments, and not have to fix everything, which, believe me, took a lot of work.
I'm like, this is an audio podcast, so listeners can't see that my jaw is dropping open as you describe all that you took on. Did you take on any of the anger?
Um, I would say yes, definitely. I took it on, and not only did I take it on, but I think at a certain point in time, realizing that I was stuck in the middle and not being able to help them resolve or support them in resolving any of the conflicts, that it made me angrier. And so not only I think was I absorbing it from them, but I was also making myself angry when I came to the realization that I couldn't fix this. And it made me angry with myself, and it also made me angrier with my parents because they weren't fixing it either. And I had the responsibility of trying to bring them back together. So on many fronts, it made me angrier, to answer your question.
And did that anger carry forward in your life? And it had to have.
100%. So, I was married for a little over 10 years, and I was angry in the relationship, um, and couldn't understand a lot about where my anger was actually coming from. So, like I said, until I could realize that my anger was disproportionate to the situations that I was living,
Mhm.
I couldn't really become aware of it and do the deep work that was necessary to
Yeah,
overcome it.
yeah, yeah. As we say in the leadership work that I know that you have experienced, um, the thing is never the thing, right? Or the thing that we think we're upset or angry about is never really the thing, right? There's
It's
something.
not the thing. It's definitely not the thing. No, there's an example I use uh, quite often when I'm dealing with couples, and it's an example that I know you know Brandy very well, and it's an example that I use with me and Brandy, and at one point in time,
Your partner, let's just for the
yes, my beloved Brandy, yes,
my dear colleague and collaborator in chief.
and sister. You
Yeah.
guys are like sisters. It's amazing
Oh,
the relationship the two of you have. It's so great. Yeah, so at one point I got upset with Brandy because she wasn't putting the salt back in the cupboard that I wanted her to put the salt back in. And so I think it's about the salt not being put where it is, right? But it's not about the salt not being put where it is. It's about how does it feel when your partner doesn't do something that you're requesting of them, and how does it make you feel when that happens? And so, the meaning that I'm making up about it is she doesn't care enough about what I want, or she doesn't love me because she's not doing as I'm asking or requesting. And so that's a story I make up, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the salt, right?
quite humorous when you put it that way, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it wasn't humorous in the beginning. But after I realized that, the story I was making up and how it wasn't working out, humor is it's a great icebreaker for anger also, right? Like when you're upset about something, like, can you find the humor in this? And and like I said, once you start to realize that you're making up stories that have absolutely nothing to do with you, it can become humorous.
Um, our subject for today is emotional mastery in relationships, how we can build healthier relationships by mastering our emotions, right?
Right.
And so that has brought up a contextual question for me about this whole notion of mastering emotions and what that really means. Does it mean we're controlling our emotions? Does it mean we're understanding? We're reaching a place of understanding. Are we transforming our emotions? How does one actually, can one actually master emotions, or is it more like managing emotions?
Great question. I love that question. And for me, it's none of that. It's actually allowing my emotions. So, so often we are told not to feel a certain way, get over it, suck it up, that kind of way of dealing with our emotions, push them down. And for me, it's not that at all. So when I talk about mastering my emotions, it's giving myself the space to feel whatever it is that I'm feeling and to process it. Because for me, my emotions are a guide. They're really a guide, and I look at them as guides. And so when something's coming up for me emotionally, it's not about controlling it. It's not about pushing it away. It's not about trying to make it better. It's actually processing, feeling, allowing, experiencing, and understanding what's the message behind what it is that I'm feeling.
So
And
if you're
then,
someone like me,
yeah,
who grew up in a home with two parents who stayed married for 66 years until they both passed away. Um, Anger was never openly expressed in my household. Emotions, let me just say, most emotions were never expressed in my household. Certainly anger was never allowed. Now, as a child, I would often hear my parents behind closed doors, and I could hear and feel and sense that there was conflict happening, but it was never out in the open. And so, of course, what did I take from that as a child is that It wasn't okay to be angry. It wasn't even okay to feel angry.
Mm,
So I have always had a very difficult time being with anger, processing anger, allowing anger, even becoming aware that I'm angry.
mm,
So when you talk about allowing and processing and giving yourself space, what about the person who, like me, grew up and that just was like it was not only was it not a guideline, it just wasn't present. How does someone go from that? Now, I would admit that over the years and all the work that I've done, I have taken some territory in that. I still have a difficult time with anger.
yeah,
I have a difficult time when other people are angry, when someone else raises their voice and
right.
all that. Yeah, I can feel my body just tightening and clenching, and I am definitely not allowing myself to be impacted by that. What do you do with someone like for you as a therapist? What do
Yeah.
you do with someone who just doesn't know how to allow it and they don't even know that they don't know?
Yeah. So just to give you some understanding of anger and why we get angry. So first of all, we call anger a mask. So anger is really it's a secondary emotion. It's not the first thing that we feel. So I could feel frustrated, betrayed, rejected, unloved, disrespected, all of those things. And because I don't want to feel that, I jump to anger. And then I want to project my anger outwards, right? And so anger has a really bad rap in the sense that people think anger is bad. The majority, if I would ask people, especially who are coming to me for anger management therapy, one of the first questions I'll ask them is anger good or bad, or neither? And most of them will say it's a bad thing because like you, it doesn't feel great. And then when we use it destructively in our lives by yelling at people or calling them names or worse, getting physically aggressive with people, it has a bad rap. But the truth is that anger is an emotion like any other, and it's not good or bad, it's actually neutral. And and when we
That's a hard
realize,
one for people. That's a hard
yeah, 100% is hard. 100% is hard. So anger's neutral. It's our response to anger that determines whether or not it's good or bad.
one. Mhm.
So if I'm angry and I'm yelling at you and I'm screaming at you and I'm calling you names and I'm debasing you or whatever it is I'm doing, anger is bad, right?
It's
But
destructive. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
destructive and it can be. But if I'm angry with you and I allow myself to feel it and I allow myself to process what's underneath it, feeling rejected, feeling disrespected, feeling betrayed, whatever it is that I'm feeling, and I don't need to attack you for it. I'm actually doing the internal work to understand what's going on inside me, and I'm able to process it, and I'm understanding where it's coming from because it's like we just talked about. We're not upset about the thing we think we're upset about. We're upset about how that thing's making us feel and what we believe. And and so I might believe that you just disrespected me, but is it the truth that you did? It probably isn't, but it's an old wound that is being touched inside of me. And the true test of that is knowing that my reaction in that situation is disproportionate to the situation.
So
That's,
it takes a tremendous amount of self-awareness then. It
yeah,
takes a lot of personal work to get to the place that you're sharing about, doesn't it?
it takes, I like to tell clients who come to me for anger management that this can take as little as 6 to 8 weeks of weekly sessions where we're working on this, we're understanding what your triggers are, we're understanding where they're coming from, and we're working on your response to them rather than you being reactive. And when we meet weekly and we work on these things, and you have a chance to work on them, and we talk about your reactions, the following week, all of that is progressing you to be somebody different, to respond to your emotions differently, to give yourself the space to feel and allow what's going on so that you can do the work. But it requires a huge shift in, first of all, understanding that anger is neutral. It's not bad. And if I'm angry, it's not a bad thing. I just need to be with it. I need to take a break. I need to manage my nervous system. And we'll probably talk about that later. But it's one of the ways that we learn to master our emotions is learning to work on our nervous system. That's part of the process. It's part of the process in dealing with anger or any emotion, because when we're really, really stirred, our nervous system goes out of whack. We go into the sympathetic nervous system and we go into fight, flight, or freeze. And from that space, we can't be responsive. We can only be reactive. And so we need to do internal work to regulate our nervous system so that we can get to how to respond, and we can get to what we're really feeling, and we can get to allowing ourselves to process that.
Do you find with people who come to you, people who are referred, let's say mandated anger management, though that sort of category of client that you work with, do you find that there is much resistance in them as when they come to you in the beginning and unwillingness to do?
It's a great question, and I'm often expecting it, and it's not there. And part of it is they just received a huge wake up call because they were arrested and they were put in jail and they were processed, and it was like, just imagine that happening, right? And I mean, luckily for me, I've never been through that, so I
So
don't
they
know what
come
it's like.
violent. So they come to you as a result of having committed a violent act.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so they've been arrested, and imagine the humiliation of being carried away in a police car and fingerprinted and spending the night in jail and being told by a judge you need to do this. It's like it becomes a huge wake up call in many people's lives. And I could tell you that I get very, when that happens, there's very, very little resistance because they don't want to end up back in jail. And they know that if they don't do the work, that there's a chance they will go to jail. And for most first offenders, they don't usually end up getting sentenced and spending time.
Mm.
But they know that if they don't do the mandated classes and do the work, that they will end up in jail, because that's really what the judge is telling them. Either go do this or we're going to put you in jail. So it's a serious, serious wake up call.
So let's say that you're working with a couple, and we're not talking about court mandated anger management here. We're just, let's say you're working with a couple, or even an individual who has, well, we could say anger management issues, but there are all kinds of emotional issues, aren't there? I
100%.
mean, someone could have abandonment issues, or someone could have worthiness issues, or all kinds of emotional issues. And let's say that they don't really know, or they're not consciously connected to what's really going on with them. Where do you start? Where do you begin with someone?
Well, it's really the work is really understanding the trigger, because most of what you just talked about will lead to anger, right? If I feel like my partner is going to abandon me or reject me or whatever it is that's underneath it, it's going to lead to anger. And so I'm looking for patterns of in the relationship where that anger is coming up, and seeing if there are repeated patterns that are, and the underlying feeling is abandonment. And so that's where my skills as a regression therapist come in, because I really get to combine the two.
Oh, I
And
was just going to ask you that next. How do you combine all of these various skills and talents and modalities that you work with? Do you combine them? And you just answered yes. And how does that work?
yeah, it really it obviously depends on the case that's in front of me, because like you said, I have so many different tools in my tool bag. So the yoga teacher training really was instrumental in me being able to regulate my body and my nervous system. So I have tools to help people regulate their nervous system, which is such a big part of living a harmonious, peaceful life, because if we're not regulated, we can't do that. Regression really helps me because Regression therapy just means to go back. For those who are not familiar with what regression therapy is, regression just means to go back to understand what's the wound that is coming up for us in the current life or in the current moment, because it's like we said, we're not really ever fighting about the thing we're fighting about. We're fighting about how that thing makes us feel, and it's an old thing that's making us feel this way. So
Yeah.
regression helps me to be able to work and do inner child work with my clients so that once I do know the trigger, let's say it's abandonment, then I can go back and say, okay, well, what's the history of you and your parents? Like, where did this come up for you? And often I'll find, well, when they were divorced or one parent left, one parent disappeared, whatever the case is. So then I can use regression therapy to go back to heal the inner child and the wound that's there. And then once we do that, then the little abandonments that happen going forward in our lives, they don't affect us in the same way as they
Mhm.
used to.
And so does regression therapy involve, I would imagine involves a variety of different kinds of techniques that you use.
Yeah.
Can you
So
share some
yeah,
examples? Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So in order for regression therapy to be effective, you have to be able to feel an emotion in your body. So if I was to ask you, when you're sad, where do you feel that in your body?
Mm.
What would you answer? Or do you feel it in your body?
Oh, for me personally,
Yeah.
when I'm sad, um, I think I feel it in my solar plexus.
Okay. Right. So the way regression works is I get you then to focus on the sadness that you feel in your solar plexus, and I expand on it. Like I'll ask you questions uh, like what does it feel like? Does it have a shape? Does it have a size? Does it have a color? Um, how long has it been there? When is the worst time that you felt it? Because really, in regression, what we're trying to do is either to go back and address the worst time you felt it or the first time you felt it, and usually first and worst kind of go together.
Mhm.
Um, and and so that's what I'm trying to trace back to heal. So when you feel that sadness in your solar plexus, what does it feel like? What does it look like? What does it shape like? Is there a color? When is the worst time you experience that? And then you're going to start to tell me a story about the worst time you experienced that. And
Mhm.
that's what's going to lead me back to heal what
Uh-huh.
needs to be healed.
So you're getting in underneath through the embodiment of the emotion.
Yeah, yeah.
You're
And so
getting you're getting into the core story that was woven around that experience.
exactly. Exactly. So in order for that therapy to work, you have to be able to connect an emotion with some sense in your body. And surprisingly, some people can't, right? They're just disconnected from their body or they're disconnected from their emotions and they don't feel them in their body. They don't feel where they are. They don't feel the physical impact of them. So in that case, regression therapy is not as effective. But regression works really fast and really effectively when someone can feel the emotional the emotion in the body.
Is there hypnotherapy involved or any kind of
It's actually I would say it's kind
alternative?
of like the reverse of hypnotherapy, because in hypnotherapy I'm not a hypnotherapist, but they're getting you to relax to a point. In regression therapy, it's actually the opposite.
You're amplifying.
I'm
Yeah.
amplifying, intensifying what is there and getting you to go
Uh-huh.
deeper through intensifying and amplifying it.
Interesting. And I'm thinking of some of the principles of leadership that you and I both work with. And I'm thinking of the one, the only way out is through. And so when you say you're intensifying it, so you're actually leading people to amplify and intensify their experience and actually go through it.
100%. So you were asking me like, how are we mastering emotions, right? It's the same thing. The only way out is through. The only way out is by experiencing what's there and allowing yourself the time and the space to process it. That's how we master it. That's how we don't let it have control over us. So when we're not mastering our emotions, they have control over
Yeah.
us. We are being reactive to our emotions. When I'm mastering them, I am allowing them, I'm giving them the space, I'm processing them, I'm getting the message that they want to tell me. They're telling me how my life wants to change if I'm ready to listen.
Yeah. That I would call that I have my emotions don't have me.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have them, they don't have me, which is a huge shift in perception. Yeah.
An extremely powerful shift, right?
Yeah.
Because we could either be, in leadership, we talk about either being victim or responsible, right? So I could be a victim to my emotions and they have
Yeah.
power over me and they're controlling me,
Yeah.
or I can be responsible for them and integrate them and process them and respond from that space of being responsible for them and not blaming other people for how I feel, right?
Which I think, what you just said, blaming other people for how I feel or how one feels. I think that is just almost endemic in culture with human being, for the most part, human being, generic human being, who has not really done, let's say, consciousness work, spiritual work, any kind of depth work, does not have access to that kind of understanding that they are responsible. I think, you know, it's a minority of the population, I dare say, that really walks on the earth knowing consciously that they are fully responsible for what they think, what they feel, what they do, what they believe. Most people just walk through their lives kind of bouncing off of and reacting to life rather than responding to life. So maybe this is a distinction that applies here to respond to an event, a situation implies that I have a choice, that I'm choosing, that I'm actually inserting in this little nanosecond between the time that something actually happens and I have, I either respond or react, so that I actually have choice. And that idea, that notion that I author and I am at choice is a huge one for people, is it not? In your work with people,
I could
teaching
I
this?
could not agree more with you, Judith. I agree with you that most of the couples when they do start to come and see me, they are not being responsible for how they feel and they want to blame their partner for
Yeah,
how they're being that is making them feel this way. And that simply isn't the truth. And
yeah,
when we really get that, and it's a really hard thing to get, that's
yeah,
when we really become powerful, and that's when we really understand that we are actually the creators of our own reality. And we can create something beautiful or we can create something really toxic. And when we're creating something that's toxic, it's because we're in the blaming mode, and when we're creating something that's beautiful, it's because we are being responsible for who we're being, what we're saying, what's coming out of our mouth, how we're responding to whatever is coming up for us in our lives. That's when we become really powerful, and we can create beautiful things in our life.
so I would imagine that it must be a primary distinction that you're teaching people that you're working with, that whole distinction of choice, responsibility. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
consciously. Yeah,
It really, like you said, starts from a place of understanding that I'm responsible for what I'm feeling, and if somebody's not getting that, then the the possibility or the chance that they're going to create something different in their lives is pretty small. And I'll know really quickly when I'm working with them, is this someone who wants to remain in victimhood and blame, or is this someone who wants to really create something different in their lives and be powerful to choose to be responsible and create something completely different from what they've been living.
what if I am, what if I'm in a relationship and I am angry, something has triggered the emotion of anger for me? How can I responsibly communicate, express um the anger that I'm feeling without
Blaming
Rip
them.
the other person's face off.
Great question.
I mean, that
So,
was a little dramatic, but you know what I mean.
yeah, I know what you mean. Been there, done that.
Yeah,
So the first thing I would say is regulation of the nervous system. So like I said, when I'm angry, I'm in fight, flight, or freeze, and when I want to rip somebody's face off, I'm in fight. And so I don't want to be in fight. So I got to process, right? I got to take a break. I got to take a half an hour to sit with what I'm feeling. I don't want something to come out of my mouth with whoever it is that I'm angry with in
yes,
that moment, right? Because I know whatever it is I'm going to say, it's going to escalate the situation and it's going to make it worse. And I'm going to say something I'm going to regret.
yep,
So timeout is what's really required, but not just a timeout for timeout's sake. It's like it's a communicated timeout. I'm telling the other person, hey, you know what? I'm really pissed right now, and I need a half an hour for me to calm down, so that they know I'm not abandoning them, right? They know
yeah,
that I'm not that I care about the solution to this. I'm not just blowing them off and walking away. So it's a communicated timeout where I'm saying, hey, you know what, I need to calm my body and whatever my practice is, whether it's meditation, whether it's going for a walk in nature, whether it's listening to some music to change my vibration. There's many different ways that we can calm our nervous system. And once I am settled and I'm calm and my anger has subsided, then I'm likely going to feel what's underneath it, like what's really going
mhm,
on. What am I really feeling? And that's what we want to connect to. And that's what we want to communicate to our partner. Hey, you know what? When this just happened, and I'm not blaming you, this is what I felt. And I just want you want your partner obviously to be also open, right? Because even if I say that, I might start them off down the road of being defensive. So we got to have an understanding when we're dealing with a couple that when I'm communicating how a situation is making me feel, not you, but the situation is making me feel, I'm not looking for you to defend what you did. I'm not looking for you to, start a fight or argue back or attack me because I did something, because all of that's possible, right? I'm just really looking for you to hear what it is that I'm feeling and tell me like I'm not crazy for feeling what I'm feeling. Like just validate. I understand that when this happened, you felt this, right? So as
yeah,
the other person on the other side, that's the response. The response is, I understand that when this happened, this is how you felt. And often, like that's all we need as human beings is to be able to express our most vulnerable feelings, whether that's feeling, abandoned or rejected or whatever, and somebody else could actually just hear it without
yeah,
needing to fix, because we're not here to fix the feelings, right? I'm not here to fix my partner's feelings. She's not here to fix mine. I'm just here to tell you, you know what, when this happened, this is what I felt. Can you understand that this really made me feel this way? They may understand it, they may not understand it, they may agree with it, they may not agree with it. All of that's fine, but we're just looking to be understood. Okay, I understand that that's how it made you feel. In their if they lived the same experience, it doesn't mean they would feel the same thing. Possibilities they
yeah,
could feel
yeah,
something completely different. But just understanding that in my experience, this is what I'm feeling, will automatically just lower the tension levels. And then
yeah,
from
yeah,
there, really what I want to do is if I have a request that something's going to change, I'm going to make my request to them. I'm going to say, hey, you know what, in the future, could we handle this way instead of that way? So I'm not blaming them. I'm not shaming them for whatever happened. I'm not in that mode. I'm just saying, hey, you know what, when this happened, this is how I felt. What I'd really like going forward is this. Is this possible?
yeah, yeah. So it sounds like, wow, there's so many things coming up for me. I don't even know what question to ask first. I have so many. Um, One thing, it sounds like there needs to be ground rules for how to engage in conflict effectively,
Yeah.
right? Ground rules. So there needs to be kind of a map or a framework that people can internalize and then utilize when they're in a conflict situation. So they're not just, so they have a tool to pull out of their tool belt to kind of guide them, just
Yeah,
like their emotions guide them. And so that there's a kind of language, seems like there's a structure of language that people need to learn. For example, using I statements. Like you said, when this happened, I felt such and such, versus when you know, you
you did
did this.
this,
Yeah,
right?
you did that, or
Yeah,
finger pointing.
yeah,
So, so there are specific skills and techniques and language that people need to have available to them to really navigate this tricky river of relationship, if you will.
100%, 100%. And I know one of the things that we were going to talk about is, some of the things that we shouldn't do in relationships. And
Yeah, okay, let's go there.
I know that John Gottman, a famous couples therapist, and his wife, they did extensive studies with couples, and they talk about the four horsemen to the apocalypse. I don't know if you've ever heard of this
Oh,
before.
yeah, sure.
And so those are the don'ts, right? Like they know that when they see these four horsemen in a relationship, it's likely to lead to separation, divorce, end of the relationship type of thing.
Okay, so what are the four horsemen, the four don'ts?
So the four horsemen are number one, criticism. So, you just use the word, you said we shouldn't be pointing the finger and saying you, right? So whenever you say, you always do this, or you don't, you never do that, or we're
Yeah,
pointing the finger, right? We're criticizing what we don't like in the relationship, which is going to lead to the second horseman, which is defensiveness. So when I
yes,
accuse you of doing something or not doing something, you're going to go to defensiveness. And what's going to happen from there? You might even then come on the attack. Well, I did it because, but you also don't do this, and you also
yeah,
don't do
yeah.
that, and up and up.
Justification, rationalization. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
So we know those two things don't work. And those are
So
the first two
criticize
horsemen.
and
Defensiveness.
defensiveness. Okay.
Third one is stonewalling. And stonewalling means was one of my mother's favorites. It was silent
Yeah,
treatment,
my
right? Like,
mom too.
yeah. So when you piss me off, I won't talk to you until whatever. You apologize, you change
Yeah.
your ways. I'm in complete shutdown mode. That was my mother's favorite go-to. Um, there's another way we stonewall, which is if we're in that criticism defensiveness mode, I'm not really listening to you, right? I've already, when you're speaking to me, I've already got my response in my head, and that's what's playing. It's not me listening to you anymore. It's my response in my head that's playing, and I'm ready to come back with my defense or my attack, right? So
Mhm.
it's another way that we stonewall. Um, and so that's number three. And then number four is contempt, and that's the worst one. So
Mm,
contempt is a real disrespect for my partner. Like,
mm,
I'm name calling you, I'm rolling my eyes when you talk, I'm sneering, I'm laughing at you. Like, I don't have respect for what's coming out of your
mhm,
mouth.
mhm,
And that's the one when I see that in a couple, and when John Gottman saw that in couples, when that was really, really elevated, the disrespect part,
mhm. Yeah.
that it's a clear sign that he could predict with a 90% accuracy which of those relationships were going to end depending on the level of contempt in the relationship. So, I mean, it's normal, in relationships, every once in a while, we're going to criticize our partner. Like, we're not perfect human beings. We're
Mhm.
going to be defensive at some point in time, and we may shut down. Um, it's really all about awareness. Again, we talk a lot about it. We've been talking a lot about awareness, right? Where are we at with all of these things that we're in how we're being, and how quickly can I realize, oh, you know what? I just criticized my partner, and
Boom. Yes. Self interrupt.
Self-interrupt. Oh, shoot, I did it. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. This is my request. So instead of criticizing, what we just talked about before was, what's my request? What is it that I want different? Because if I'm asking for what I want different rather than criticizing you for what you didn't do or what you did, the chances of me getting it are much greater than me when I criticize you. So again, it's awareness. We're not perfect. We got to own it. We got to be responsible. So we're coming back to that principle of responsibility again, right? Like I just screwed up. I got to own it. I got to apologize. And now I'm going to make some kind of amends to you for what I just did. Let's put that in the past. Let's forgive it. Let's not hold resentments. And let's figure out how we can both win, because we definitely want to create a win-win solution to whatever problem we're having.
Let's talk about making amends. Um, one of the things that one of the experiential parts that we have people do in leadership is to make amends where it's appropriate and important and necessary and where it matters to people.
Mm.
And, let's say that there's a really old wound that's been festering in a relationship, or there's one that is continuously renewed. Um, and let's say that I have been working with you and I've become aware of my part in it, of my responsibility. And I now have a desire to go back in there from a different perspective, with a different intention, and that is to make amends. And my partner over there, they're still pissed off and they're still wounded and angry and upset, and they're still over there in breakdown. And I'm coming knowing that I'm walking into this
Minefield.
potential minefield. Exactly. How do I navigate that minefield when my intention, and how do I stay on track when my intention is to come in and attempt to, and I own it, I'll take ownership, I get it, I'm here to make amends.
Mm.
Guide me through that.
Yeah. So so really you're kind of looking for forgiveness, if I'm hearing you correctly. And
Yes, yes.
it's a difficult one. So first, the first question I would ask is, do you forgive yourself? Because if you're carrying anything into that conversation and you haven't forgiven yourself, that will be felt by the other. And
So can I just say, insert here, for me personally, I probably need to apologize. I need to, and not just a fake apology where I'm kind of giving it lip service, because I know a lot of people are really good at that, but I mean an authentic apology. I think for me personally, until I have expressed an apology and ask for forgiveness, until I've done those two things, and not until then would I be able to forgive myself.
mm, interesting,
Hmm.
interesting. So what would happen then if you were looking for that forgiveness from someone who isn't here anymore?
Um, yeah, and I've done that too. I mean, I've had that experience with a deceased ex-husband.
Yeah.
And I have conversations with him all the time. So I feel that we do have connections, spiritual connections
Yes.
with those who are no longer in the physical.
Yeah.
And that, in that case, yes, I did forgive myself, and asked for his forgiveness and gave him forgiveness. Um, yeah, that was
So here's the thing, Judith. If I haven't forgiven myself or someone else, underneath that is a resentment, right? I'm either resenting them or I'm resenting myself. And
probably myself.
right. Well, definitely when we're looking for amends, we have resentment towards ourselves. And
Yeah,
only I could fix that. I
yeah,
could go to somebody and apologize and they could accept my apology, but I still might not forgive myself.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so one, they're not mutually exclusive. I can forgive myself first, and I can let go of my resentment for whatever it is that I resent myself for. I would do that work first, and I would be clean first before I go to somebody else and ask for forgiveness. I got to be okay with me before someone else can be okay with me, because they will feel
Yeah.
that I'm not okay with me right from the beginning. And what's the chance that I'm going to be forgiven if I haven't forgiven myself, and they can feel that I haven't forgiven myself? So I would say do the work first to forgive yourself, let go of the resentment that you're carrying. And it's difficult work, but underneath it, it's like, when we're making amends, it's like, you said you want to go and you want to give a heartfelt apology, which sometimes it could be heartfelt and sometimes not.
Yeah.
But for me, it goes beyond an apology. It goes in terms of responsibility. It goes beyond that. When there's something I'm resenting myself for or not forgiven, there's probably for me an underlying message of something I still need to understand, grasp, learn, change before I can forgive.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yeah.
something blocking.
Accept. Yeah. Accept.
There's accept,
Something to
yes.
accept. Yeah.
Yeah, it might be that I need to accept myself for not being perfect in the moment, right? That maybe I didn't know better at the time. I did something that was hurtful to somebody else.
Yeah.
And to be able to accept that and forgive myself and know that I've learned from it and be able to apply that learning going forward in my life. Because sometimes we hold that resentment because we haven't learned and we haven't changed and we haven't learned to do something different going forward. So I would say that's the work that needs to be done first. When that's done, then whoever it is that I'm going to go and ask forgiveness for, I want them to be regulated. Because if they're already upset with me and they're already pissed off at me still,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like a fresh kind of thing that's just happened,
Mm-hmm.
the chances of them forgiving me are very small. Very, very small. Their
How
nervous.
do you do that? How do you set them up to be regulated?
So my first question would be, I want to have a healing conversation with you. I want to have a conversation where I own what I want. Are you ready to hear me own it?
Okay.
And if the answer is no, the answer is no. And I got to be okay with the answer being no.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that will really test me to understand whether I've forgiven myself. Because if the answer is no and it's hurtful to me, then there's a really good chance that I haven't done the full forgiveness work of myself.
Yeah.
But if I can go there clean, having done that, and say to them, I want to have a conversation where I own what I did. Are you ready to hear it? If they say yes, then there's a really good chance of success. But if they say no, they're not ready, they're not regulated. And I can't regulate them. I could ask them if they want support being regulated, but even there, the chances of them saying yes is going to be also pretty small. So sometimes
So,
you need to leave them
yeah.
time and space.
So in the instance where both parties in a relationship have played a part, obviously it's never just one person, right? Both parties in a relationship have played a part in generating, perpetuating the conflict. And I want to, or one party wants to come and make amends and kind of clarify, heal the relationship. Should I, let's say, and I initiate it, and the other partner is over there, they're still, I'm going to say, running their racket. They're still running their thing over there. What I hear you say is, if they're still running their thing over there, they're not ready to hear me. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, what if they're still running their thing over there and I come to them and say something like, I know that there's been, a lot of breakdown and upsets and things in our relationship, and I would like to account for my part in it. And I'm not going to talk about, and wouldn't even say this, but this would be in the back of my head. And I'm not going to talk about your part in it. I just, I'm just here to acknowledge and take ownership of my part. So let's say I do that.
Yeah.
And let's say they listen and they hear me and I acknowledge and take ownership and I apologize for my part and I never mention to them what their part in it is. Okay. And so I say what I need to say, what I feel is in my heart to express and share and da 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 da. And just, thank them for listening. And one of two things is probably going to happen in response to that. Either they come back to me and they say, you're absolutely right. You were a jerk and, you did this and you did that and da da da. And I come back with them, you're absolutely right. And I apologize. So I do not come back to them with an angry response or a justification or anything. I come back to, I am completely disarmed and I come back to them with, I hear you. Yes, you're right. I hear that. I absolutely apologize. Could that then play a role in helping them to regulate so that they could then hear and also get in touch with their own responsibility and perhaps take ownership? Well, as I think about it, I haven't exactly been an angel and perfect in this relationship, and I acknowledge blah, 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 blah. In other words, do you hear what I'm saying here?
I do. I do. And,
Yeah.
and I think the answer to your question is there's a possibility for both. I've seen both. I've seen when I
Okay.
when I come and be responsible for how I've been and I own it, and you come back and say, yes, that's how you were, and I say, yes, you're absolutely right, that's how I was. There might be an expectation for me to have them do the same thing, which hopefully I don't have,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
then it starts to
You got
become,
to have that. You cannot have that agenda.
nope, nope,
Cannot.
because then it's a transactional apology, which doesn't work,
Yeah.
right?
And it's manipulation. So
Right.
that's no good. Yeah.
No good, no good. So it could support them, and we're leading by example, right? When I'm responsible, I might create somebody else who's responsible, but I might not. And what's my reaction to somebody not being responsible? Am I going to be pissed off, defensive, attack them for not owning their part? Or am I just going to be satisfied with the fact that I went there, I owned my stuff, I was responsible for me,
Yeah.
I did what was right for me? What's my reaction? What's my response?
Yeah. Yeah. See, that would be that would be me. That would be me feeling that I did the thing that I felt called to do, regardless of what the response was. I elevated myself to communicate and express at that level, regardless of what kind of a response I got.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that should be, if you're going to have an agenda, that's your loan agenda, right? Me being responsible for me,
Yeah.
and not having an expectation that something is going to come of it.
So with all of with Reiki and with yoga and regression therapy and all of the skills and tools that you have, can you integrate these? Do you bring spirituality into your work with people at all?
Definitely when people are open to it, I do. If I hear people talk about the universe, the creator, God,
Mhm.
I definitely bring that aspect in. And certainly people who are open for healing on an energetic level through Reiki, if they're open to it 100%, I will also bring that in.
What kind of transformations have you seen in people? I'm thinking particularly of, let's say, someone who's come in court mandated anger management. There must be some incredible, I would hope, some
Yeah,
incredible transformations that must be very rewarding for you.
I think the one that touched me the most, Judith, was a father who had kind of severe anger issues with his son, and whenever he would see his son act up or his son get angry, his response was anger back. And and then one day, this gentleman that I was working with, he came back to tell me about his week, and he said, "I want to tell you about a breakthrough that I had." And he said, "My son got really pissed off with me, and my normal reaction would be to be pissed off with him, but I walked up and I walked up the stairs into his bedroom. I knocked on the door, asked if I could see him, and I gave him a big hug." And everything from
Mm.
that point on just melted. Like all the tension melted. It was him
Ah,
choosing a different response to his son and not reacting from an angry place, but actually acting from a loving, compassionate space, understanding that that's really what his son needed. And that I could tell you made all of the work with him so worthwhile. It really touched my heart, and to be able to be a part of that kind of healing in a family is really something else.
yeah, really, how rewarding that must be. And you know what I'm thinking right now, Eric? There are some thought systems that teach that we choose our parents and we choose our family, and that our soul actually chooses the familial environment that will best support us developing ourselves, growing ourselves, learning the curriculum that we came into a physical body to learn. And as I'm thinking about you and the family that you were born into and what you shared in the very beginning of our conversation together about your parents, it was the perfect environment for you to become who you are today.
Absolutely, and I do subscribe to that theory. There's in when I was studying to become a regression therapist, there was a book we were required to read. It was called Journey of the Souls. I don't know if you've ever read it, but he talks about that. He takes people back into past lives, and in between the time of birth and rebirth, he was able to regress people back to that point in time where he actually discovered that people did that exact work where they were choosing their family, they were choosing the lessons that they came to learn, and the souls that they needed to come with in order to learn the lessons that they needed to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So often we want to blame our parents for how we are and make them responsible, but I believe that the truth is we chose that. We chose this life. We chose the lessons. Life is happening here for us. It's not happening to us.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and when I look at it that way, I know that I'm looking at it from a place of responsibility. I'm not looking at it as a place of being a victim of who I was born to.
Yes, it's such a beautiful and powerful, I think, consciousness um to adapt, to live inside of. And I for one can personally attest to the power of your work. As I was the remote recipient of your Reiki work. You did remote Reiki. Do you remember that?
I
You did
do.
remote Reiki on me when I broke my foot about a year and a few months ago. I broke my foot, and your partner Brandy Saffron, who is a dear friend and colleague, and we're partners, we're sisters and soul sisters, suggested that you do a remote Reiki session on me. And I just have to tell you, still to this day, I remember how it regulated me. From you're in Canada and I'm in California, and the distance was nothing. It was such powerful work. So we will leave in the show notes how people can be in touch with you. The work that you're doing is so important in the world. Eric, thank you so much for being who you are, this beautiful, powerful, gentle soul that you are. I so appreciate you as a human being, as a friend, as a fellow journeyer in this human life together. Thanks for being a guest with us here in the New Beyond.
All right, my pleasure, Judith. You have a sister in Brandy, and now you have a brother in me.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. And listeners, thank you for spending time with us today here in the New Beyond. Until we meet again, many blessings.